David will go right into you, so. All right.
Two more. Sorry,
We do have two more.
I'm announcing.
There's Elna.
Hi,
Okay.
Jane.
Yeah, who?
Mine too. Alrighty. So we're gonna get started here. It's
Name's connecting.
what? Oh, okay.
So we're gonna get.
Yeah, sure.
She's been connecting for a while.
She can kind of jump in whenever. All right. Well,
Maybe she
welcome.
can try dialing it?
JT's in there, yeah.
Are you controlling chat? Can you suggest that to her?
Absolutely.
Sometimes dial-in is more effective than internet.
I mean, it's not the official meeting. She can kind of jump in whenever. So I figure we'll get started. Take as much time as we can out of this hour. So welcome everybody to the August 7th, I want to say, meeting of Multi-modal Transportation Commission. This is kind of a special session because we're having, I guess we're still calling it Your Turn, where we try to invite representatives from the various neighborhood associations to kind of discuss stuff with us and get a little bit deeper into transportation things. In this particular edition, we are talking about the Neighborhood Traffic Management Program, or the NTMP, which has been around for a couple of years. Just general meeting notes. So this is our study session. We usually just sit around this table. It's fairly open-ended. There's not a lot of, Robert's Rules of Meeting. We just try to have an open conversation, geek out on some of the details, try to figure out some next steps if that's where things are going. I am currently masking because I'm coming off of a cold. I shouldn't be too contagious, but just in case. So if anybody can't hear me particularly well, let me know. I'm used to projecting, but I'm not used to being muffled. So let me know if I'm unclear, and I can try to repeat myself if need be.
Hold that mic closer to you, Nick.
Really? Okay.
Thank you.
Must be really muffled. Okay, so we're going to start off with introductions and then move on into a quick presentation from Dave about Traffic Control 101. So I'll get started.
Before we get started,
yeah.
we gotta go through these quick meeting
That's right.
rules for
Ground rules.
everyone. So thanks everyone for joining the meeting tonight. We have a few housekeeping items for this hybrid meeting. The meeting is being recorded and broadcast on the city's YouTube channel and cable channel 25. Please remember to mute yourself during the meeting when you're not speaking, if you are online. The chat function for this public meeting is disabled. All chats will go directly to staff. Unless you are participating during the meeting, please turn your video off. This will allows the active meeting participants to be seen on the screen. When you will still be able to hear the meeting. And when you are participating, please turn your video on. If you have any trouble, you can send us a chat. The city reserves the right to mute people or turn individual videos off to minimize distractions during the meeting. And turn it over to Nick.
Cool. So let's do quick introductions around the table. Say your name, who you're representing, which I guess is also going to be which neighborhood you live in, most likely. I think that's probably good enough to start. So I'm Nick Kuzmyak. I've been on the Multimodal Transportation Commission for 4-ish years now. I'm the current chair of it, and I live in the East Lawrence neighborhood, but I used to live in Pinckney. So that's me. Charlie?
My name is Charlie Bryan, and I'm a member of the Multi-modal Transportation Commission, and I live in the Quail Run neighborhood.
My name is Ed Adlott, and I'm with the MMTC. There you go. I'm a new member, and I live in West Lawrence. So that's it.
Hi, Charlie Sedlock. I'm with Old West Lawrence Group, and been participating with Dave and his staff and MMTC on the traffic calming program there.
I'm Pat Collette, and I'm Commissioner for with MMTC. I've been on for about a year and a half now, and I live in the Pioneer Ridge neighborhood.
Good evening, everyone. Jake Baldwin. I'm an engineer with MSO.
Hi, I'm Lisa Harris-Friedman, and I represent the Barker neighborhood.
Holly Joyce, I represent Schweigler neighborhood.
Josh Spence, I represent Pinckney Neighborhood Association.
Phil Collison with the East Lawrence Neighborhood Association.
Michael Allman with the Brook Creek Neighborhood Association.
And Gary Weber with Sunset Hill Neighborhood Association.
And this is Dave Cronin, city engineer, in case you, I don't know if you caught your turn. We have a couple folks online too. Barry?
Yeah, Barry Shalinsky. I'm president of East Lawrence Neighborhood Association.
And Hillary.
Yeah, hi. My name's Hillary Carter. I'm a commissioner on the MMTC. Good to see you all.
And JT, we'll catch you later for public comment. I have a couple people to make sure that I don't skip it, so. All right, I think that's everybody. So Dave, you want to start off with the intro slides?
Yeah, so we did attach a memo to the study session, just kind of gave an overview of the neighborhood traffic management program and some of the work that's been done over the last couple years. Most everyone's familiar about the speed limit change and lowering the speed limit on residential streets to 25 miles per hour. We've acquired equipment to collect data, go out and get speed and volume data, so we've used some of the funding to do that. We did a public outreach and education campaign a couple years ago, and we're following up on procuring some more stickers and yard signs for that process, for that part here this year, and then we're doing some targeted enforcement as well as part of the program. And tonight I think we're kind of want to talk about the program and maybe get into some of the a little discussion on the process for neighborhood applications, and obviously, you know, for those of you that have been familiar with the project we've been doing in Old West Lawrence over the last couple of years, we worked with the neighborhood to get data, implement temporary traffic calming devices, get data. We did another round of temporary installations, and now we're moving forward with a project to permanently construct the devices here with money that we have in this year's budget, and then proposed for next year as well. And then I would say historically, the last couple of years, we've had $300,000 in the program. Next year, the proposed budget has $200,000, so there's a little bit of a decrease in the overall budget. But with that, I think, you know, as we're talking about the process we went through with the Old West Lawrence neighborhood, I think it was a good process. I think we see some, we've identified some areas of improvement that we could work on to help, you know, define the scope better early on, make sure we have a good, clear process for community engagement. Those are a couple of things that we may look at to kind of improve upon the program going forward. And then I think we've also identified the need to look at other maybe isolated locations where we get traffic calming requests that don't really fit, you know, a neighborhood-wide study that we've seen through reporting to our reports and comments through our online traffic safety webpage, where traffic calming is desired in areas that really don't affect other adjacent streets, and it, you know, wouldn't really fit the program. So, you know, stepping back a little bit, the programs, we're looking at a neighborhood-wide program. In the past, 4+ years ago, it was an individual street basis, and so the goal is to kind of look at, you know, the bigger picture, because we know that installing traffic calming on streets could affect adjacent streets. And anyway, so that's kind of where we're at, and we had drafted some just brief revisions of things to consider for moving forward with the program on the agenda. But with that, that's kind of what I have to say, and then I'll just here to listen to the neighborhoods and see what feedback you have.
Yeah, so that's a pretty good background of what's going on, and I think it sort of encapsulates and explains what I feel has been part of the, I don't know, part of the core, sometimes misunderstanding of the neighborhood traffic management program, because it's so broad, because that's the point, to kind of attack bad traffic from every angle, that I think maybe people don't realize that there's a lot of stuff going on, and it's not just the stuff that we all saw in Old West Lawrence, right? It's the target enforcement, the data collection, the signs in everybody's yards, and the speed limit signs. It's kind of, it's a multi-pronged effort, and a lot of the kind of citywide stuff has pretty much already happened. So at this point, we're now down to the neighborhood scale stuff. And I think like Dave was saying, one of the things that we are interested in is, going forward, do we want to stick to the original plan, which is do a single neighborhood at a time, direct consultant and or city, probably mostly city resources into a single neighborhood, do it for a year, make sure we do it right, and then move on to the next one. At that rate, we may not get to every neighborhood ever, right? So that's a trick, but it also means that for the neighborhood receiving the pilot and the upgrades, it's maybe the better situation for that neighborhood. The other way forward is maybe, like you were saying, the hybrid approach of tackling acute issues in other neighborhoods that maybe wouldn't otherwise qualify for a full area-wide plan. So we're not entirely sure what the best route is forward, and that's why we have you guys here. Another issue was how to apply for the traffic calming pilots. So I think for the first one, it was only Old West Lawrence and maybe East were the only ones who applied for it. No, it wasn't East then.
It was North Lawrence.
North Lawrence, gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. So going forward, we were kind of wondering as well, was there any reason that your neighborhood didn't apply, if that's the case? Or if they did, was there some struggles or barriers or difficulties with the application that could be improved upon? Any feedback in that regard would be particularly helpful, I think, because there's a balancing act to making things a low barrier to entry in terms of making sure that we get not only the neighborhoods that are very well organized and connected, but also the ones who just need help and maybe have a couple of strong-willed individuals. But we also don't want to make it such a low barrier to entry that we get kind of half-baked proposals that don't have a lot of broad support in the neighborhood, which could be an issue as well. So I'd like to hear from you guys. Maybe, yeah, let's just get started.
Holly Joyce Schwegler. So before Old West Lawrence was in place and you had started that, was when I heard about it, and I can't say exactly who, but it made it seem like there was kind of a list going. So Old West Lawrence was going to be, and then East Lawrence was mentioned. And then Schwegler, we kind of broke down to just individual and wanted to get. So maybe the criteria, I guess maybe I wasn't sure even what it was for an entire neighborhood scope.
That might be, I don't know which of staff would be able to explain how the application was distributed. I'm not familiar with how that happened.
Yeah, I can't. I think we pushed it out to the different neighborhood representatives. It's been a few years, and I wasn't part of that piece of the process, but we had received 2 applications and basically ended up selecting Old West Lawrence as the pilot because they had put together a pretty thorough application and had an internal neighborhood team, traffic team that was that was working on it. So for the first project, we thought that structure would be beneficial. But yeah, but going forward, how the application process and how we choose the neighborhood, that's needs to be something that we think about. There wasn't any data that was used with this first project that we did, and so that's something that may need to be considered going forward.
I was just going to add, Dave, I think the original process might have been interpreted as an individual effort, but you had to show some support within the neighborhood. So it wasn't like you had to apply as a neighborhood association.
Right.
You had to apply and then show support.
The support of it.
So that could be confusing, maybe.
Josh and then Gary. Actually, sorry, quick sidebar. As I've learned in facilitating my own housing association meetings recently, I'm going to do my best to kind of create a queue as it happens of people who are raising their hands. Everybody who's sort of in a back and forth conversation, I'll kind of let that go, but if I see somebody's hand up, I'm going to try to slide them in as best as I can. So if you have your hands raised, I will acknowledge that I've seen you, and I'll do my best to kind of slot you in. So we'll see how it goes. Josh, you're up.
Josh Spence, neighborhood. One of the things for us, when we found out was for our timeline, it was like less than 2 days when it was due. And then we just didn't understand the process of the application or how to even get it. Because it was like the information, there was like a lot of information that just was conflicting. that we received. So it made it very hard for us to know whether to move forward or not. Because we knew we had areas that in our neighborhoods that really could use a lot of effective traffic management, but we just didn't really know how to go about it.
Gary?
We got the notice and read through the materials and formed a subcommittee, and it seemed all very clear how to apply. And we started on the process, and then we quickly realized that we didn't have a good idea where the most important thing to deal with. We weren't gonna just say, well, we need help. The application actually asked you to outline a place that you wanted the money to be spent. So we sent out, so we didn't apply because we couldn't really justify sending an application when we didn't know which areas were the most problematic in our neighborhood. We you know, and I think that what your experience in Old West Lawrence shows that that's extremely important, that you know what your neighborhood agrees on are the most important things, and we didn't have that. So we spent 4 months. We did a survey asking people to suggest areas of concern, and we got 15 areas of concern, and then we did a prioritization study to find out which were the most important, and we got 60 responses and identified 2 of the most important. And 4 months later, we're ready to apply. So we were planning to do the second year, but of course it was delayed and such. And when the next pilot kind of comes out, we're ready to apply. As far as the process goes, I have absolutely see no problem with it, except that it seems a little strange that you would apply with no data.
I actually was gonna raise that question to Dave and Jake, although I don't know if this is in Dustin's arena or not. I feel like there was some sort of survey, like a see and report various traffic issues, or like, hey, I see people speeding here. Wasn't there some kind of tool back in the early days of the NTMP where people could kind of self-report and almost generate a data set? Is that still available? Is that information that was used in the Old West Lawrence pilot?
It's still available.
Yeah,
Okay.
we have what we call the Traffic Safety Concerns webpage.
Okay.
That's what it's called. But it's where individuals can go in and if speeding complaint or failure to yield, and basically pinpoint the location. So the MSO engineering staff can see that, the police department can see that. And so we've used that primarily to identify enforcement locations where you have hot spots. So if we've got, several complaints in one area, we've used that for the targeted enforcement. That could also be used as part of the program, but some of it may be subjective. If someone's speeding through the neighborhood, it's not, what speed are they going, but it's some of that maybe perception. But it does give us a good indication of some issues for enforcement.
So that's kind of an interesting thread then. So Gary, it sounds like the issue you were raising almost sounds like a barrier that Sunset Hills was kind of unable to overcome. Like you knew there was a general issue, but you couldn't point out exactly where, nor were there maybe the resources to do so. So I'm wondering could we make the application process a little bit simpler for the neighborhoods that, don't have the resources of an Elna or an Old West Lawrence to be able to say, like, we know there's an issue, and we know you guys have some sort of data, and there's, collected crash info. Would that be enough to at least get us started? And then if there's a consultant on board, they can help identify, like, well, based on how your neighborhood's laid out, we are pretty sure this is going to be a problem here. Could that be done as a way to kind of shortcut the application process? And I guess from your guys' point of view, is that something that'd be doable, I guess?
I think that, to me, that's what sounds like it would be doable.
Okay.
I'm also wondering if it's possible, sorry, Lisa had also.
No, you're okay. Yep, ready to
if it's possible maybe to publish a report that would share that information that's been collected at the neighborhood level. That could be really insightful for the neighborhoods themselves to recognize that maybe they have a problem they didn't know they had. If people are reporting it to the city but not sharing it with their neighborhood.
Sounds like land would be a good conduit for that, probably, right?
I mean, the city would just
That's an easy
publish
one.
it,
Yeah.
assuming that everything can be geocoded, and then publish a report that
Okay.
shows incidents reported by each neighborhood.
Okay.
I like that idea, and I like not having it part of land, because land doesn't represent every citizen in the community, but the city does.
Yeah. I just mean like still publicly available, but push it through land as like a brief, brief segment at a land meeting, kind of like how transit and parking shows up sometimes, or planning and development.
Should also just be a staff report to us.
Yeah.
Okay.
Lisa, did you have something else to add? And then Charlie, you're next.
I was just going to give a perspective on the Barker neighborhood. We were very interested in transportation issues and had done a study on it with the city and AARP. And we also had applied for funding for traffic calming on Leonard Street, which had passed all the hoops at the time, was ready to fund, and then was shelved because we changed the process in the city.
Right.
Around that time, we had a change in leadership in our neighborhood association, and for whatever reason, the group just sort of fell away. COVID didn't help, but we haven't had an active association in many years. So probably someone got information about the traffic calming, the study that could have been done, and but it never got shared with citizens, and so it didn't move ahead. So that is a weakness of our neighborhood associations in town, that if you don't have a strong leader who can communicate well with your members, things get lost in the cracks.
Yeah, and I think that's particularly a problem for places that really don't even have a representative at all. I mean, at least here you are representing Barker, but there are plenty of places that have traffic issues that have really no representation, which is really tough to reach them. So I'm not sure what to do about that, honestly. Charlie, you got something to bring up?
Sure. So just wanted to offer up a few of our comments that may help address some of these things, because we've been at it for a while. So first of all, just to acknowledge, we really appreciate the MMTC, the staff with the city. We've worked pretty hard over the last 2 years as a group and have several hundred, if not thousands of man hours in this. And so hopefully some of this can help ease the journey forward to really get the city more toward complete and zero harm streets and infrastructure, because at the end of the day, that's what we're all here for, and that's what's going to draw folks to Lawrence and continue the journey of the city. When we're out trying to draw talent from Chicago and Denver and Boston, the kids are much. I just wanted to know if my check would be cashed, or I had some money to get in the bank, and they have much better questions. And their questions are, can I walk to work? Can I bike to work? How safe is it? And it's pretty cool to see those kinds of questions. And this is, the marketplace speaking. And so anyway, and really, I'm speaking on behalf of the neighborhood. Some of my comments are a little more personal, but the folks on the committee, we generally agree on most everything. But just so you guys know, 2 years of experience, we really want to improve the process, increase safety, and really increase the ROI and speed for the city, because we have a lot of folks around this table, and the speed is not going to move fast enough to generate the safety that all the neighborhoods want. So first, I think it's very important to establish the budget, whether it's neighborhood or a specific project. The budget, also to do some past project wins and fails and timelines with either the neighborhood or whoever is applying, so that they can understand up front what has happened in the past, and really realistically, what can happen, because we're a little vocal in Old West Lawrence, and Dave can tell you, we kind of push and prod and do this and that, but we didn't know some of that stuff, right? And so in absence of that, I tend to push. Okay, gather data prior to scoping the project. That's always tough. It's money, but there are new remote sensing technologies and other things. It'll really help you. We did surveys, and some of our folks really thought their street was the most dangerous in the neighborhood. It turned out to be fairly safe. We had other folks that thought their street was the safest, and it turned out to be much more dangerous than they thought. And data really helps, but that's always costly. I think with the remote sensing, there's some really fantastic opportunities out there. Dave's much more knowledgeable on those things and the vendors than I am. But it can really allow for a data-driven project instead of a who's the loudest person in the room, even within your own neighborhood, because there are some folks that just do not realize that as you're driving safety, that might be an extra 2 seconds to their drive to their house, and that's, you know, kind of the end of the world. But once they see the data, it really helps them understand that they can increase safety and drive a little slower or a little more cautiously. Establish the success criteria for speeds and pedestrian and bicycle safety up front. You know, most folks in here, I work in the industrial side and safety and mining and waste, and so we're dealing with a lot of traffic things, so I'm somewhat knowledgeable in it. But, you know, everybody needs to understand what those success criteria are. We know what success criteria are in many aspects of our life, but we don't understand, you know, the 85th percentile, and I have a different feeling on 85th percentile than Dave does, but we need to have these success criteria up front so we know what we're going to do with that data. Some of these, my comments are a little out of order. I was trying to get my notes together over the weekend and was traveling, didn't have time. Staff completed walkarounds with us, as did some, if not all, of the commissioners. Those were very handy to see things in the third dimension, especially when you're we were attacking a traditional grid system neighborhood. This wasn't cul-de-sacs and things like that. So it was pretty. It was a systemic system, or more of a system. So those were very handy. Pick days that were a little cooler than we did. I think doing the built devices are great. They can be very expensive. I was in that industry as well. It's very expensive with concrete and everything. Anything, we would advocate any kind of psycho-perceptive devices that are creative, that still meet, you know, all of the guidelines, whether it's paint, delineators. That's a way to accelerate safety for more neighborhoods and to get more projects concurrently. Communications, planning, and execution. As a neighborhood, we've done a lot of communications, and we're not professionals at communications, but we have a lot of folks that are fairly good at it. It would be more helpful to have communications from the city. Not engineering, they're very busy, but there are communications professionals within the city. It would be handy to have more of the communication driven by the city than by the neighborhood association on some of these meetings. Continuous improvement. I think during pilots, there's a real opportunity to continuous improve. We saw very quickly some of the devices were working just spot on, and some of them needed to be adjusted. And with pilots, you're literally talking about a Makita and a drill and a few things and changing the geometry. And when you're seeing that, we think that those quick and dirty continuous improvement opportunities should be capitalized. In terms of projects, I do think that in all the neighborhoods where there are existing traffic calming devices, when I drive around, I think most of them are real wins or real successes. And some of them I'm like, you really need to further improve this to make it even safer. And so there may be something when you're delineating or scoping your projects, you may say, what does my neighborhood really need? Well, we got that one over there. Do we need another? We might need to go back and improve that one that's not working as well as you think. We talked about utilizing third-party remote traffic monitoring to get more data. Process mapping. I do think having a good, just basic process diagram right up front. We'd be happy to help map anything. Dave, we do a lot of that internally. Just so folks can understand, which step am I at? I forgot where we are in the process. Are we here? If yes, this. If no, that. Very basic. The speed trigger benchmark, I actually think that folks should be going, 75, 80% of the traffic should be going the speed limit or lower, or you got a problem with your speed limit. And so in Old West Lawrence, it's 20. Neighborhood wanted 20. We can't enforce that with enforcement, so it really needs to be by using devices, I think. And so I really think that we should aim for a little more rigid. On highways, it's a much different thing. You can do a lot of things on the Autobahn, you can do a lot of things on I-70, but neighborhoods, we're talking about, families and kids and elderly and people in walkers and wheelchairs and bicyclists. I think it's on your agenda to talk about Vision Zero. I'm a big advocate of Vision Zero and a rigorous process toward true no harm, zero harm monitoring. That's very big in the industrial areas, and I think it applies to roads as well. And then the last thing, in terms of benchmarking, I have family on both coasts. That's good and bad. It's expensive on the travel budget, but it is handy to see other communities that are further along this trajectory than we are. So one is Berkeley, California, where I was yesterday. Another one's Burlington, Vermont, where we have family. And they've spent so much money and time on this that use their resources and don't be afraid of it because it's a different city. They've spent so much with consultants and engineers. There's a lot of great data. There's a lot of great reports. There's great process diagrams on their website that you could actually start with right there. And when we look at our peer cities, one of my facilities operates a recycling system for processing Lawrence recycling, and our peer cities are Northern Europe and Seattle and Copenhagen. And so when we think about our peer cities in terms of walkability, do we want to compare to my hometown, Kansas City, Kansas? Or do we want to say, hey, we want to be Columbia? Probably not. Do we want to be maybe Iowa City or Boulder? I mean, think about the peer cities that we want to be compared to, and that will help inform the decisions and so forth. And that's all I have. Sorry for taking so much time, but and we really appreciate working with the city and MMTC on this.
No worries, that's kind of why we have you here, because you've been through it, so. Gary?
I want to make a couple quick points about data and cost. Data is crucial, and we need to make sure we don't start a project without data, and then we need to evaluate at the end and do even more data gathering. But there's more than just volume and speed. There's also crash data. It used to be a year ago when we started formulating our pilot proposal, I contacted city staff, and they gave me a link to crash data statewide, and I was able to look at our neighborhood and see how many crashes there had been at every intersection and street in our neighborhood. And I did an analysis, and it was very quickly obvious where all the crashes were. I went today to that same URL, and it's not there anymore. So I'm curious about what happened to Kansas crash data. But I think you could make that part of the application process. Have you looked at the crash data? Do you know where the crashes are in your neighborhood? Are they where you think they are? Because we found out they weren't where we thought they were. So that's real critical. And then another thing that would be very helpful would be to be able to get individual traffic crash reports from the Lawrence Police Department. Our pilot study started from a pretty bad crash on Crestline, and the first thing I wanted to do was see the traffic report, see the crash report. But you can't get one if you're just the president of a neighborhood association. You have to have the license of one of the vehicles involved or the name of one of the people involved. So as president of the neighborhood, I couldn't look at the crash data for that particular crash that started this all off. So, and then it costs money to get copies. You can't get it online. You have to go to the police department and get a paper copy, and it costs you a fee. So if the police department could help us out, it would really be very helpful for us. And one final thing. We saw with what happened in Old West Lawrence, or I think we saw, what happens if you don't get input from enough of the neighborhood to give a consensus. And we have 200 members in our neighborhood association. We have 1,000 residences, just single family and duplex in our neighborhood. If we wanted to just poll our members with a piece of paper, that would be about $200. If I wanted to go to the entire neighborhood and just one letter saying, we want to do this program, what do you think? That's $1,000 for me to send one letter to everybody in our neighborhood who's in a single or duplex. So we don't have any funds from the city. It's just our $5 a person membership fee, $800 a year. It doesn't even start on this kind of an effort. I can send out emails, and that's how we did our gathering of data, was with emails. I sent email asking for problems and an email prioritizing. So even if you have an active board of directors or executive committee and a strong leader and a good organization and a strong mailing list, if you don't have the money to find out what everybody and get something that everybody can agree on, then you're going to run into the same problem. You're going to put out a pilot proposal, and the whole neighborhood's going to blow up with, you didn't tell me, I didn't hear about this, I don't think this is where the problem is. It's on my street, it's not on his street. So I think it's really important that before you do anything like this, you make sure you have some kind of consensus in the neighborhood, especially if it's a neighborhood-wide program. If it's just one street, that's less of an issue, because you can walk the street and get the input from everybody whose house is on that street.
I wonder if there's a chance to maybe, I mean, budget's always a problem, right? And it sounds like the budget's getting reduced from this year to the next year. I don't know how budget talks happen in terms of asking the city for more money for NTMP, but it seems like there could be a high use for maybe an assistance part of the budget, like, you know, for neighborhoods that don't have the funds to do what Gary was saying and basically like get the word out, you know, then it's going to be pretty hard. There's a financial barrier that I don't think we've thought about before. Like organizational barrier is one thing, but financial is another entirely, and that's a little bit hard to surmount. So, I mean, I almost wonder if there could be like a pre-application, like, hey, this thing's coming out in 2 months. If you're interested, but you don't have the funds to mail people or, you know, rent a camera to gather your own data, then, you know, you can apply for this $1,000 kind of short-term grant from the budget. And I mean, $1,000 out of $300,000 is chump change. So I feel like that may not be a bad idea, but how many grants do you grant, right? I mean, it's a bit of a rabbit hole, but I mean, you could even just say like, all right, well, 10 grants each time that we go around to at least allow 10 less well-funded neighborhood organizations to at least attempt to compete. And worst case scenario, then they don't get the application in, at least they've now reached out to the membership and that can start conversations for next round. So, I don't know. I think we've already discussed the budget for NTMP for this upcoming year, right? But perhaps that's something that we can try to work in for next year's talks.
Nick, can I offer one thing on that, just based on our experience? We've paid for, I don't know how many newsletters we've hand-delivered. I don't know how many newsletters in the last 2 years. I've spent a lot of money. You almost have to get to electronic distribution of information. And I know there's still folks without emails. But maybe that grant, if you want to go that route, can be, hey, here's whatever, a few $100 to reimburse the people going out and getting people's emails. But if you're going to have rapid communication, it is very expensive to do emails. I mean, to do mailing and or hand delivering.
Agreed.
Oh, sorry. Who was up first? Can anybody help me?
Josh.
It was Josh? Okay, sorry. Lisa.
My experience, and that's on commenting on that. From my experience with Pinckney, it's like we rely heavily on both for a mix between for different things between mailing and electronic media and different electronic sources just to get information out to our neighborhood, because there's so many different ways that we've had to learn to disseminate the information, but also along with our coordinator being able to be effective at it. Because before it was like we had when I became onto my executive board for my neighborhood association, it was a little bit of a mess, and our coordinator at the time was struggling to catch up. And I love our current coordinator; she is awesome.
And a lot of neighborhoods don't have a coordinator. It makes it pretty hard if you don't have one. I know like 4 or 5 do, I think, but it's more the exception than the rule, I would say. Lisa?
I have a question for Dave. Do you have access to crash data?
We do,
City?
yeah,
And could you share that with the neighborhoods?
we can.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's pretty good, actually. It
And-
has like what kind of crashes they were, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and with our, as we were working on our Vision Zero safety action plan, I would anticipate we're going to be working with a consultant to help develop that, but we're going to be looking at crash data to help steer that plan. So that's going to be a major component of that, but that certainly can be shared.
Okay. And you have for all crashes, not just fatalities and serious injuries?
All crashes that are reported.
Yeah.
Yep, they get reported, they go through KDOT, and then we get those usually a year after. I don't know if we've gotten 2022 yet. I have to check, but sometimes it's like about a lag of a year or so, but, yep.
Okay, so how would a neighborhood request that?
You could submit an open records request, and then we could put it together that way. I mean, right now, we don't have a process, you know, it would take staff time to do that, and so that would be the best way to do it.
I thought it was just a GIS overlay. Isn't it just like interactive?
It is.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Okay.
And I don't know, I mean, the reports themselves are not, I don't think not
They're not
anyone
that
can
detailed.
access every report, but if you wanted to see where the crashes are at,
Yeah, just like the
That-
base data.
that is, anyone can get to that
Just on
online.
the website?
Yeah.
Okay. And it'll tell
And
you-
we can make sure that you get have the link or the layer or whatever.
Oh,
Get it.
Barry's got his hand up. Yep, thanks. Barry?
See if I can pull it up.
Yeah, thank you. In terms of like barriers to application, we do have a lot of these resources that other neighborhoods don't have. And even so, found the RFP process to be a little bit cumbersome in terms of what was being requested. Part of the problem that I have is that I don't even really know what's available in the world of solutions. Like, I have heard, and that's of course a problem, quote, I have heard. So like a lot of stuff is, word of mouth in this world. I've heard that the city doesn't really smile upon speed bumps as a traffic control device, that was sort of, oh, that was 10 years ago, but we don't do that now. But yet, when I drive down the new 19th Street east of Harper, they do have speed bumps. So I don't really know, do we do speed bumps or don't we do speed bumps? Clearly, like the idea that was tried early on in Old West Lawrence of forcing people into turn maneuvers was very unpopular, so I wouldn't even begin to propose something like that. Some people love traffic circles, some people hate them. We got those little islands on Barker Street. I mean, there's like this whole universe of stuff, but I don't know what is passe anymore, what's state of the art. If you're a neighborhood group trying to put something together and get community consensus, first you kind of have to really know what even are the options. Clearly, as others have said, you need data. You need to know what the problems are. We've done some of that work. We have anecdotally identified certain dangerous intersections, and we got the crash data, and in fact, yes, those were dangerous intersections. So that part was not too tough, but the possibilities of solutions is tough. And frankly, what happened in Old West Lawrence scared the bejesus out of me. I don't want to preside over something like that and have the whole neighborhood fighting with each other, because we've got too many other things that we need to deal with. I mean, we've got historic preservation, we've got rezoning. I mean, traffic is like one thing out of a dozen, and if we can't fix it, at least we don't want it to divide us.
Charlie, do you want to comment on that? Because I know you lived it. So.
Be happy to comment on it. Safety is not a popularity contest. When you have near misses, when we talk about data, the real data that's hard to get at is near misses. So every near miss is a near fatality. When you're nearly hit getting in and out of your car, when you're nearly hit crossing the road, it's a near fatality. And until we're very, very savvy, we won't have that data. You know, things, change is divisive. Any societal change is divisive. And so while we tried some very aggressive devices, there were folks, a silent minority that loved them. There was a majority that did not like them. But big change is going to cause some divisiveness. And so it is nice to have consensus, but if I asked everybody about consensus on drunk driving in the 1980s or seatbelts, we wouldn't be where we're at now, right? And so it's tough to make change, but sometimes you got to do it.
Yeah, and I think part of the problem that we see a lot is that, you know, as walkable as a lot of Lawrence neighborhoods are, we're still a very car-dominated community within a very car-dominated state and society. Most people have only ever known driving to everything or being driven to everything. It's very different to all of a sudden not be allowed to go everywhere or go the speed that you want to go. So I think, you know, as good as the outcomes of the traffic calming pilot may be eventually, I mean, I think we should be all under no illusion that it's going to be hard. It's good, even if you have consensus, even if you have a active neighborhood association and a traffic safety committee, it's going to be hard because a lot of people are going to come out of the woodwork with something that they've never cared about that all of a sudden affects them, and even the slightest inconvenience will become a battle flag. So, yeah, Phil.
Well, I guess in East Lawrence kind of went for a piecemeal approach, and I think Barry mentioned that, and we collected traffic data and we gave it to the city, and I guess throughout those discussions I never heard the city say, well, we have access to traffic data. And so if the city has traffic to accident data and we're trying to reduce accidents, then the city's sitting in a position where they can do some analysis broadly of where are the corners that are getting all of the accidents and push those. And instead of why wait for somebody to complain about it? If you know that there's been 15 accidents at this one intersection, why wouldn't the city be pursuing something there and notifying a neighborhood, hey, we've noticed you've had 12 accidents at that certain intersection, and we think we can do some things that'll make it be better. Why, you know? Yeah, I'm surprised after all of our interactions that there's a neighborhood traffic reporting tool or something like that where, and we reported a number of things, and I never got feedback that there was something built into the city that we could have been using. And yeah, so yeah.
I know my neighborhood's been and I know that I'm aware that other neighbors too
have been reporting onto a lot of wherever we can, just on problem areas, but it just always seems like there's rarely, very rarely any response from the city and back. And that, maybe that's something that would be a good thing to kind of help the neighborhoods be able to kind of be aware if there's something that they're not seeing, to be able to start a process with the city to take steps to be able to either reduce it or somehow eliminate an issue.
Holly? Yeah.
Very quickly, I just am sitting here thinking how with Schwegler, the only traffic calming that has been installed was because of the bike boulevard. So that came in, we never really had neighborhood meetings with regard to what they were doing. It's just this is what is happening. So that is two thoughts, one of which is a speed hump was installed. It's right in front of my house, which upon leaving, I asked the concrete company, I asked them, are you adding more? Is there a second, step to this? And he said, no, and he drove off. And everyone, it's a joke in my neighborhood because it does not slow anybody down. It was not a height that was supposed to be, and so therefore it doesn't do anything. But my point of that is because with this whole project, this changed the traffic flow in the neighborhood. So we've kind of been just dealing with and working with this. And I look back and think, this again is a situation where all of this is not in the best interest because we do have an elementary school, we border KU, and we have now, because of the bike boulevard, people are just using other streets to go pick up their kids. We have actually a lot more issues. So I think that, there's, maybe it is that things get installed and then we need to revisit or follow up, because in our case, we are kind of at a crossroads as to, how do we go about, other streets that are having problems? We now have the crossing 21st Street coming in, which is all fine. But I think, if a neighborhood does this pilot, other things can change what goes on in your neighborhood with traffic.
Yeah. I think that kind of speaks to why the holistic approach is so important, because if you only do a single street, then you can have spillover effects that maybe weren't a part of the study. So, Gary?
I'm going to encourage you to think a little bit more about a two-step process.
Yeah.
A preliminary application, and then if you get through the first preliminary application, then the city will help you, if necessary, to reach consensus in your neighborhood about what needs to be done, and they can also help you gather data on those areas that your neighborhood decides are important. Now you have some kind of significant portion of the neighborhood that agrees with you, and you have volume and speed data. And then you're ready for a formal application, and the formal application now has support from a significant portion of the neighborhood backed up by good data. So I think as long as it's just a one-step process where you're applying for something that is going to be awarded and done, that's problematic.
It's an interesting idea. And as an engineer who goes through these things with cities in terms of contracts and proposals and requests for information, something I've been seeing recently is something called the request for expression of interest, which is really clunky, but it's almost like a pre-RFP, pre-RFQ. Michael? And soon, by the way, I think we're going to cap it here and move to public comment after this. So,
I just want to support what Gary just offered there. From what I'm hearing, it seems like, and I would agree, that as far as the neighborhood members, residents, we don't have the expertise, the technical knowledge, the understanding of what devices are available, first of all, and that the city endorses, or the capability of those devices and how well they work, in what locations, come up with specific sites and overall design. Neighborhoods don't have that expertise, whereas staff does. And that's, I think, what Gary's getting at, that if you have a preliminary application, because what we are good at is identifying a problem. We say, what can we do? And so that's where staff can help to lay out what the options are, to help understand and provide the data, for instance, like the crash data, and then understand options for control devices. So I would definitely agree with what Gary was proposing there.
Can I offer one comment? Just real quick. City staff, and maybe even JEO, did a fantastic job on day one with a complete PowerPoint. It was right in the middle of COVID, so everybody was 100% virtual, of laying out, I think, all of the all of the devices and a snippet of information on decreased speeds and so forth. I don't know if we had any budget on it, but they did a good job on that.
Yeah, I think that's something that we need to put out more publicly. I know we presented it, but it needs to be part of our, our toolbox that we present of options, yeah.
Burlington, Vermont's got it all ready for you.
Cool. So at this time, we're running out of time for a study session, but I would like to make sure we have some time for public comment. Let's start with online, because we usually start with people in person. So would anybody on the call wish to make a public comment about the study session? And just general rules apply. It's 3 minutes, and then we got to cut you off, unfortunately. All right, I don't see any hands raised, so let's go to the room. Would anybody in the room like to make a public comment?
About an issue or about the traffic?
So at this time, only for traffic, neighborhood traffic management program, but later we're going to have a general public comment as well.
Great.
And there is somebody online. JT, you're up.
You can see my chat. Thank you.
I cannot.
Just said he was going to raise it up directly with WAN.
Okay, sounds good.
What
All
was
right,
the chat?
He was just raised an issue directly with WAN, not today with us.
Okay, yep.
Hi, I'm Eric Kirkendall, 714 Mississippi, and I've been involved with this project since the inception. Want to preface by saying my lessons learned are not necessarily criticism of anybody. Our neighborhood was the first neighborhood to go through this, so we're all learning. I have 3 fairly quick suggestions, lessons learned. Earlier notification of neighborhoods. We had notification really late and didn't have much time to, our neighborhood group didn't have much time to talk. More involvement run by the city with neighbors throughout the process. We try to do a lot as a team. I think in many cases we would have been better off with trained traffic engineers there. And also for the city, be open to national standards and best practices. We've had one particular, we're real happy with the support we've gotten. People have worked really hard, but you can go to any city in the US that is fairly advanced about being safe and building safe traffic patterns, et cetera. You'll see lots of signage and neighborhood traffic circles like they're building for us and elsewhere. And we haven't been allowed to do that. And most cities do, and I think Lawrence should consider looking at national standards and trying to keep up with where the world is going. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Okay, so just to wrap up, I'm trying to synthesize a couple of disparate threads that I think are all kind of coalescing. Oh, sorry.
Another public comment?
Oh,
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Kyle, do you want to come up?
6 or 5:30.
Anyway, yeah, thanks.
You're good. Sure. Let's see there. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I just popped in. And I assume this is just public comment about
Study session. Yep. About
informing the
yeah, just
neighborhood
general
traffic.
neighborhood traffic management plan.
Cool. So I think, and I, like the rest of the team from Old West Lawrence, I'm on the Old West Lawrence traffic safety team, 705 Main, Kyle Johnson. I'm happy with where things have ended up and appreciate everybody's, time time and attention to the matter, and thanks for the opportunity to speak tonight. I think if we had to do it all over again, this could be so much easier. And a lot of that stems from probably just a documented change management plan and communication plan, and maybe not relying as much on the neighbors to do so much work, especially in the way of communication, because every neighborhood association is going to be different. And my guess is if you'd continued to rely on the neighborhood association so much, it will probably be a new disaster every time. Now, maybe some neighborhood association, maybe if we worked with them and we said, okay, look, this is exactly how you have to do it, and they followed that plan, it might be less bumpy, but I think probably what happened in retrospect is some people in the neighborhood, we're not a small neighborhood, but we're not a huge neighborhood. Some people in the neighborhood had specific issues, and those got brought up. But maybe other people in the neighborhood had different issues. Like, I didn't even know that it was a thing until the devices went in. So a lot more time and attention up front. And then subsequently I joined the team, right? There was kind of an uproar. I was part of the uproar. But then I joined the team, and then over a period of months, weeks and months, we came together and we figured it out as a neighborhood. And so again, I'm thankful for your help and for the other members on the team, their help as well, and their contributions and kind of blending everybody's ideas together. However, if we could do this again, I would suggest that a lot of time and attention gets placed on making sure that you have a large and representative group of people on such a body, so that you identify issues before they become issues. And in fact, the Old West Lawrence Association is now, we just had a meeting yesterday to talk about bylaws changes. And so one thing that I'm going to be recommending probably in that is that when we have what I'm calling special advisory groups, that we make sure that any project that gets tackled has kind of a large, diverse crowd on it, so that everybody is contributing ideas early in the process before it becomes a bit more dramatic than we'd like it to be. So I think that's number one, is just the recruitment of a larger crowd of people to inform decision-making process. And number two, lean on the group for the deliberations internally, but not so heavily on the communication. And I would argue that at each stage in the process, a public meeting should probably be had. Because otherwise, the finger pointing starts about, well, I didn't know. And that's when things really get sideways, is when somebody feels like they didn't know. And so even this, we're going to have another upcoming meeting. And, I think that's important. So there's a design now. Got to wrap it up.
Sorry.
The last thing I'll say. So there's a design now. I advocated for, hey, we need to present the design to people before we pour the concrete. So just having a public meeting at every step of the way to make sure that people feel like they've been brought along with the process, I think that just lowers the temperature significantly. Mm-hmm. So that's all I got. Thanks.
Good point. Do we have any other public commenters in the room about the Neighborhood Traffic Management Program study session? All right. Okay.
Hello, my name's Rod Hofer. I've lived in Old West Lawrence for 42 years, and I too found out about this plan when I noticed that I was barricaded from getting to my house by the traffic plan that had been imposed on the neighborhood. If I'm 100 feet from my house at 8th and Indiana, according to the plan, I would have to drive 12 blocks to get to the front of my house, because the barricades all allowed only right turns, and so you're driving around in circles. Part of the issue was a little bitter for me because my wife was under hospice care. We had 21 healthcare workers come every week, and many of them parked away from our house because they couldn't get to it because the plan was just totally ineffective. It blockaded people. Eventually, people just learned that what you needed to do was to make right turns up, or make left turns up right turn barriers, jump the barriers, go down alleys, make U-turns. 300 violations a day is what was the minimum we estimated that initial plan caused. So that's the initial part. That's when I got involved. And I must say that the committee, even though it had very dispergent ideas of what should be done, all the way from blockading the neighborhood to loosening it up, I believe that we came to a consensus of a plan that really works and does allow people into the neighborhood. I mean, we have all kinds of vendors coming in, lawn people, air conditioning people, roofing, carpenters, and they're basically considered cross-neighborhood traffic because they aren't from there. And the same thing applies to numerous other people, like my healthcare workers. So the plan that we came up with definitely slows down traffic. And in fact, all three of the major components, that's their primary function. And that worked very well. So without belaboring the point, I was very dissatisfied with the initial attempts, but satisfied with the ultimate results of working with the group. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so we're at the end of our time. I'd just like to wrap up a conclusion that I think I've come to, and push back on this if I'm totally off base, but it sounds like, generally speaking, the application process could use some improvement, possibly through some kind of screening, pre-proposal, pre-request for information sort of thing, and also with a bit of a package of information and resources included with that initial announcement, such as Gary was asking, or brought up the idea of funding assistance for communication and data collection. Josh brought up the technical assistance for the application itself. Charlie, you talked about lessons learned in a process map that, perhaps Old West Lawrence could help contribute to that. Lisa, you brought up the idea of crash data, reported traffic issues, just data that's already available. And Barry brought up just the information on available calming measures. So I feel like even just starting with those 5 could be kind of a cool, here's 5 things that you really got to know before starting that could help you out in crafting an application, even just a expression of interest. What I want to do, Dave, is probably get this on the agenda for soon, so we can talk about that offline, but I think we have more to hammer out to kind of get there. So that's pretty much all I have. So special thanks to Gary for working behind the scenes to help me organize everybody. This was a lot easier with your help. And thank you for everybody who showed up. This was a great crowd. If we want to do another one of these in the future, I think we do have a couple of free study sessions for the rest of the year. So we can maybe talk in LAN or something offline, but if there's...
I think that would be a good idea.
Okay, if there's interest in continuing, yeah, we can certainly do that. Possibly after we've had our initial discussion at MMTC to kind of figure out what's doable. And we can maybe bring back a plan for an update. So yeah, thanks everybody for attending, and that's it for study session.
Thank you. Thank you.
That might be it for the meeting too, because we only have 4 people, so that might be it. Oh no. To the regular agenda portion of the August 7th Multimodal Transportation Commission meeting. Unfortunately, we do not have a quorum. We only have 4 out of our 8 commissioners. So unfortunately, we have to cancel this month's meeting. I don't know if we need to do any official motion to do so, but
No,
unfortunately.
no official motion, but we will defer all of the items that were on tonight's agenda to the September meeting.
That's correct. So anyway, that gives everybody a good month to study the budget in the meantime. So yeah, otherwise we will adjourn for tonight and we'll meet next month.
All right.
So see you later. That's it.